get 7% off your first year with DistroKid using the link in the description. We're back in Calgary. Last time we met with Jason Talkin to discover the rich history of the Rolling Stones mobile studio and its one-of-a-kind Helios console. In this video, Jason explains the value of the RSM in today's digital recording age and why his team will ensure that this piece of history continues to make great recordings well into the future.
Hi, I'm Jason Talkin. I'm the studio and electronics engineer here at Studio Bell, home of the National Music Center, and you're watching Learn Audio Engineering.
So what's your favorite thing to record through the Helios?
I'm really blown away with the fact that in this day and age, there was no choosing mic pre's. Right now we're in this era of like, oh, I love API for this, and I love Neve for this, and Helios is great on this. And in that universe, I think I love like vocals and I love anything acoustic, so drums, guitars, electric guitars, bass is great. But I start adding to that list more and more, and I start realizing that in that era, they didn't have any choices. You chose the studio based on what the studio chose. And these people, the Rolling Stones, Ian Stewart, Glenn Johns, the people that actually put this truck together, went for the pinnacle of fidelity, and at that time it was Olympic Studios, and that's the incredible thing. And Olympic Studios did every kind of session under the sun, and so they needed the kind of most universal mic pre ever. And same with a remote truck, you don't know what you're pulling into, so you need a preamp that works for everything. And I think the more that I use the desk, the more I realize it's really good on everything. The nice thing is when you have this many inputs of that caliber, you can put the good preamp on everything.
Yeah.
There's no like, okay, what are we going to use the Neve on?
Yeah.
And modern studios, that's the thing. It's like you're always like trying to allocate your two best mic pre's to the two best or most important things. Whereas with this desk, there's no compromise. Everything's getting the same level of fidelity. And I think that ends up with a higher fidelity in the end, a better end product, because there is no compromise. It's a bit of an adjustment for people that are normally like allocating their best pre's and whatnot. But when you get comfortable with the pre, you really realize that, wow, it's good on everything. And there's a big difference between the mic pre's as is and the mic pre's which normal Helios now. A lot of these desks were parted out back in the day. They probably made under 50 consoles, and there's probably less than 15 to 20 fully intact, because most people took the preamps like you see with Neves and they racked them up. Now the problem with that is because of the earlier electronic design that I was speaking about, how we don't want transformers, minimal electronics, when you rack these up below and you plug a mic in, these output around -6 dB. So you're not at the +4 like a Neve module has, because there's no output transformer. These were designed to be in a console with the rest of the console electronics. So I feel like anyone that's used these like in this kind of format is kind of like, well, there's not enough headroom, and they're like, I can't get them loud enough, and I want them. The missing thing is the console. And what's really magic is when you take two things and you blend them together, because there's active electronics that are blending them together. So if I have two mics on a guitar cabinet, I'm using the Helios electronics to blend them together, then they're going through a transformer. That's a lot different than having Pro Tools do it. So there's a lot of advantages to using an actual console versus just the mic preamps. And in that context, in that thinking, we get away from like, oh, what are we gonna use the best mic pre on, because every pre is the best mic pre, which is kind of the best situation to be in. And a lot of bigger studios have kind of figured this out, and that's why they have a giant Neve with enough inputs for the whole session.
So have there been any digital modifications to the board? Can it run with a Pro Tools rig? Or?
No, so I guess with the console, it was really important to keep it as historically accurate as possible. Now, a lot of restorations to this type of equipment are not as conservative as we would approach it, meaning they would gut the whole thing and rewire it to a modern, like a noise spec. So the thing about consoles like this is like every ground matters, and like wiring it is very important because most of the console's unbalanced till it hits the tape machine. We did what we call a conservative restoration, where we actually make sure that we want to keep the sound of the console intact. And you know what? There might be a little bit of noise, or there might be like a grounding scheme that doesn't make sense. What we don't want to do is rewire the console, because this is the console that made all those records. There's something about how this thing was put together that is magic. So it was important for us to restore the functionality to its original intended use. So make sure that the preamps work, the EQ works, all the sends work, the buses work. And that was a huge job. That took us probably 16 to 18 months. And then finally, lastly, the monitor section, making sure that works, and the return section. It was a matter of keeping the console as analog and true to the original design as possible, because it's important not only that we retain the original sound, but retain like how the console was wired. If I was to rewire this whole console and someone comes in 100 years and looks at it, they're going to see my work, not the Helios factory's work. And it's important for us to maintain that for any scholars that want to come and study why this was on so many seminal albums, for example, you know, and what was the draw of these particular consoles, and why is a Helios in so many studios of records that we love. Like, there's something there that we felt we needed to preserve. Where the modern technology comes in is really the coordination and communication with the studios. So we have the visual cue system, which we call it. Basically, we have a camera system that connects the live rooms, which are above us, as well as the King Eddie stage, so we can do live recordings. And then multi-track wise, if we want to record something, we're using the analog console, but we're just replacing the tape machine with a digital recorder. So nothing in the console is actually digital or anything. We're just using digital stuff as our multi-track recorder.
Can you show us how to route a track to tape or to an output?
Yeah, I would love to. The console's very simple. Basically what we have is a mic pre-EQ, which can go line, regular mic, or a pad. And what's significant about this is a lot of mic pre-designs now use a resistor as a pad, and resistors do this nasty thing of eating a lot of current up. And basically, when you engage the pad, you've probably experienced this, it's clipping, you put the pad in, and you're like, well, that doesn't sound as good now. Not so much the level, but as far as the resistor, because a microphone has a very low output. So one of the great things about these mic preamps is the -20, which is traditionally a pad, is actually a different tap on the transformer. So the difference is in the mic transformer, not in a resistor that's added. All 25 of these have the very desirable Lusterphone M10 microphone input transformer, which is kind of the magic of these early Helios consoles. Basically, we have line mic or mic -20, and then there's gain up to 70 dB, and then you have an EQ, which you can cut here, and then there's also a high pass filter for all of the channels, which is at 80 or 40. And then you have a phase button, which is indicated by a light, which is really great. So if something's out of phase or in phase, you kind of know right away. So the input module then feeds the fader, and that's your level to the routing module. So when you're tracking, you can make adjustments, and that's a kind of a lost art, meaning like a lot of people track with like set this, and they just track it into Pro Tools. Whereas back in the day, you literally move the fader up and down because the format that you're recording to is tape. So there's this nasty thing called signal to noise ratio. Yeah. So you're like, we're kind of spoiled now, but a lot of those great sounding vocals are an engineer adjusting it, and it kind of like acts like a compressor in a way, because it's a little more human. Like, and so I would suggest to anyone at home, try riding a vocal next time you record it into Pro Tools. You'll thank me when you go to mix the song, because it's a lot easier. But that was just out of necessity because of signal to noise ratio. So basically your level to this routing module is controlled by the fader. One of the great things about the channel is each channel has 2 inserts that are on a switch. So I can put in a compressor and an EQ, and then as I'm recording or mixing, I can take it in and out, which is like not a very normal thing. But it was for consoles back in the day.
Wow.
So now most people just patch in their patch bay, and then they're like, most gear doesn't have a bypass. So you're just like, is it actually better? You know? And then that feeds the bus. So there's 2 buses on each channel, an odd bus and an even bus. And what bus is indicated by this little glowing LED. And we can basically go through 1 to 24 on the odd and even bus. There is basically 2 foldbacks. So you could only, like, really you could only have 2 headphone mixes happening. But back in the day, if you had more than one, that was like, it was pretty fancy. And then we also have 4 echo sends at the level indicated by this fader here.
Or a delay effect.
Yeah, so for example, we can send to the Binson Echo Rec, or I can put the flanger on one of these echo sends and send to it and print that to an extra track. And then you have a couple stereo echo returns there that feed your 24-track bus. And then last but not least, just a panning circuit here that you engage. So without it engaged, it doesn't do anything. And then when you engage it, you can pan it. So if you're doing like a blend to 2 channels and printing that, you can put one of the toms kind of in between the stereo image or whatever you want to do. Helios consoles and particularly like Olympic Studios was kind of different in the fact that you had 2 modes. So you have A mode and B mode in your monitor section. And it's really interesting because A mode is the monitor for all your bus sends. So what you're sending to the actual tape machine, and the B mode is what's coming back from the tape machine, which is really cool because you didn't want the tape machine to change the nature of the sound. It was really important that you could monitor what you're sending to the tape machine and what you're getting back, what's actually being recorded. When you're recording someone, you can flip between these and it doesn't change. Like what you're hearing coming off the studio is exactly what's coming back on the tape machine. And it just kind of gives you a confidence, especially when you're doing something like live recording.
Jason gave us a quick rundown of the inboard processing built into the Helios console. These units have been used on some of the most famous recordings of all time.
You could build it into your console rather than buy a box from a different manufacturer.
And those are the limiters from when the levee breaks, right?
Correct. So we have 2 F600 limiters, and these were most famously used on levee breaks. And then we also have a complement of 4 F760 compressors, and they're really, really great sounding. They kind of take any source, kind of make it more forward and give it some really great tone. And then one of the coolest things that I really love is this Bell flanger. So there's a built-in flanger, which is basically like a bucket brigade flanger, the same thing you would find in a guitar pedal, but it sounds incredible. And that's one of the cool things about this console. Since it's unbalanced, you can use unbalanced circuits. So it's like you can use a guitar pedal circuit and it's at the same level. One of the other cool things that we got with the truck are these split boxes. These were an ingenious part of the whole recording system. So as anyone that's done live recording knows, the ultimate live recording is to split the microphones so that the live guy has his own feed and you as the recording person has their own feed. Back in the early 70s, mid 70s, none of the venues had a split. And a lot of the rental companies didn't have a split. And you'll see late 60s photos of like Jimi Hendrix singing into 2 microphones or Jim Morrison singing into 2 microphones. Well, that was pre-split. They're like, well, we won't split the micro. We'll just add 2 different. So a lot of those photos are from actual recording sessions. So that became pretty unpopular because like you can't always tape 2 microphones and then you have to do it for everyone. So this is a transformer split box. So you have your inputs here, 5 of them total, and there's 10 inputs each. So you actually plug in your microphone here. The send to the truck goes out through this multi-pin cable, and then this is a send that goes to your PA. So the live sound technician would actually have a clean feed of the microphone. There's also built-in ground lifts for each channel, so if you have to run into it. And the most ingenious thing is I love this little monitor section. So inside of here, there's a battery that's rechargeable. So you can plug in this cable and recharge it, or you can take a power supply, plug it in, and then you plug in headphones, and there's a little switch here that's 1 through 10 with a volume knob. And so when you're on stage, you can actually monitor every one of your inputs. So you can, before you even get to the truck, you can verify that all your all of your inputs are working. So that's one of the most ingenious like live recording tools that I've ever seen. The truck has been used on a lot of different projects, which is great. We've hosted all sorts of people. We did an album project with Harpoonus and the Axe Murderer. They played 3 nights in the King Eddie, and it was all recorded by the truck. We also did an artist in residence with Ian Blurton. We've also done some single day sessions. We had the Tea Party in. They recorded a song with the truck. And then we have a lot of different artists in residence that love to use it. So it's all working. You can use it to make a live record live off the floor of the King Eddie. So we have a built-in split and all of that, as well as studio recording. So it's directly attached to our live rooms. So Tonto, which is the giant synthesizer that takes up most of the room on the 7th floor, we can actually record that, or one of the 16th century harpsichords, and all that signal feeds down 7 floors to here, and we actually have a visual cue so you can see the artists and communicate with them, and it's pretty incredible. So the thing that's important to me with the National Music Center, Studio Bell, and this entire organization is we've prioritized elevating these objects to a level where they're restored, maintained, so that they can actually be used by the musical community. And one of the things that I love about what we do here is we kind of hold these collections in trust for the music public at large. So if someone wants to use the Rolling Stones mobile, they can come here and use that and get that sound. Or if they want to use like an original Moog synthesizer or an ARP synthesizer, we have plenty here that we take the burden of maintenance and all that off of the community. And the fact is, a lot of these instruments, this recording equipment, these microphones, we have an amazing microphone collection. They're all kind of out of reach of the average working musician and engineer. And so for us, it's kind of like having like a bank or a stockpile of all this important music technology that we can then let people responsibly use while it's within our care and when they work with this technology. I think they're expecting it to sound kind of old and vintage. And when it blows their socks off, fidelity-wise, meaning like it's better than anything they've ever heard before, they're kind of really blown away. And that's kind of the most common occurrence. I recorded a night here with Leroy Stagger, and he came in and listened to the tracks after, and he freaked out. He's like, this sounds like Exile on the Main Street. And I go, well, yeah, because it's what they used. So you have like a band on the King Eddie stage in the modern era, and you plug all those modern microphones in, but it's still like, this is the common denominator that kind of puts it to that era. And this was the state of the art technology. This was the best multi-track recorder available for the money in the early 70s. It was twice the price of a Studer. For that reason, and that reason alone, these things are still running. Like, we're still be able to keep them maintained, and they still sound, kind of better than anything else. It's incredible. With that, like, technology and the fidelity, you add the inspiration to that of your favorite artists have used this, your favorite engineers have used it. We've done a bunch of recording with it, and we plan to do lots more. And I love how the truck story is not over. You know, it's got such a great beginning. The Rolling Stones brought it to life. All of their colleagues used it, all these great bands in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and now we're well into the 2020s here, and we're still adding to that list of artists that are using it, and it's still making records, and it's still like dropping jaws, which is super great.
Well, Jason, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's been
so
a pleasure.
much. Next stop, Edmonton, where we meet with Paul Johnston, head of recording at MacEwan University, because I want to know what's next for recording education.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to Learn Audio Engineering.